Hello and welcome to the Recruit Rockstars podcast, where we focus on the people part of your VC and PE-backed company. I have been looking forward to this episode for quite some time now. I bagged the elephant. It took me months and months. And if you know anything about Cameo and you know all the celebrities on Cameo, thousands and thousands, I think over 10,000, you're going to think I'm kind of a nerd because the celebrity I most wanted to interview was not any of the 10,000 celebrities on Cameo, but one of the founders and the CEO of the business, Stephen Galanis. Now, before I welcome Stephen to the show, let me just tell you about Cameo. If you haven't used Cameo, I guarantee you're soon going to. I'm a customer. I've sent Cameos to friends and family, to my amazing fiance, to my kids, and this thing is unbelievable. And it has the most virality built in of any product I've ever seen. So we'll find out today if Stephen Galanis is good or lucky or both. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I am thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for making the time. So for the next 20 minutes, we're really going to focus on the people part of Cameo, which is, possibly what you're spending most of your time on these days. But before we do that, just on the rare case that someone listening has not used Cameo, how do you describe it? And then we'll talk, and I have to understand kind of how you got into this.
So we had the idea that the Cameo was the new autograph. When you see somebody famous today, people want to go and take a selfie with them. And that's kind of the new autograph. There's a famous quote from Taylor Swift saying, "Since the invention of the front-facing camera, nobody's ever asked me for an autograph."
That's a good point.
What we tried to do with Cameo was, how do you create the selfie experience without actually being there, right? So basically, if we could remove the variable of time, and we can allow anyone in the world to connect with their favorite person in the world, Cameo is now the place where you can do that. You go to cameo.com. You can pick from our 20,000 different athletes, actors, celebrities, and basically you can send them a 250-character note asking them to say anything you want to whoever you want. And that's what we built.
It is genius. It's fantastic, and it's a whole lot of fun. 20,000. I want to touch on some other metrics just so people understand the scale of this thing. 20,000 celebrities. What other metrics can you give? I'm not going to ask you revenue, but in terms of how many videos have been made or how many a day or anything like
that. We have completed 469,000 cameos. I've got the ticker going.
Incredible.
Since we started.
500,000. Wow.
Another kind of interesting thing, 30% of our revenue is coming from abroad already. So that's a really interesting factor of our marketplace, as we are selling bits, not atoms. Like with Grubhub, nobody cares how many restaurants are in San Francisco if you live in Seattle. But on Cameo, the talent are global. Their fans are all over the place. And because we've removed that distance variable from the equation, they're getting booked by people all over the world.
Got it.
And, that's really caused the business to grow quickly internationally as well.
We're going to get to the people part of the business in just a moment, but I just want to make sure people understand the revenue model is that the celebrities, do you call them celebrities?
We call them talent.
Because they're not all celebrities, right? I could be one, I guess, right?
Yeah, podcasts. I mean, we have CEOs on now, venture capitalists. There's a robot on Cameo now. There are
Santa Claus. I saw Jesus the other week. You just added Jesus.
There's an amazing Donald Trump impersonator. So basically, if they have fan base, we want them on the platform.
Got it. And 20,000 talent, they set their own price. You take 25%, never lower, never more. You've been religious about that, which I think is phenomenal to have that kind of pricing integrity. Who currently is the most expensive on the platform?
The most expensive is Caitlyn Jenner, coming at a cool $2,500. The most booked are actually tend to be lower price, higher frequency, and are mostly some former Vine stars and YouTube influencers that you in the audience have probably never heard of. But
the riches are in the niches, right?
For sure. This is definitely one of those, what do they say? you sell to the masses, you'll be living with the classes.
Yeah,
If you sell
yeah,
to
yeah.
the masses, you'll be living with the masses. So our best talent is probably priced, somewhere. The people that do best are probably priced between $100 and $500, with an average price point of $60 platform wide.
One day when you have all 7 billion people on the planet, you'll have a top to bottom list of what we're all worth by the minute, right?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what we're building. We're building the marketplace for people's time.
Fantastic. I love it. Okay. How does a Chicago guy who went to Duke, worked in trading, worked as a realtor, went to LinkedIn, how did you fall into this? When did the light bulb go on? And what made you give you the confidence that you could lead this kind of organization? It's one thing to have a great startup idea. It's another to say, I'm the right guy to actually lead this team.
Yeah, I think so. The founding story is really interesting. Me and my co-founder Martin, who at the time was a former Hollywood producer and current NFL agent, Martin flew in for the day from Los Angeles to Chicago for my grandmother's funeral of all places. And while we were in the car, we were talking about a problem he was having, namely that he couldn't get Cassius Marsh, probably the 15th best player on the Seattle Seahawks defense and endorsement contract. And as we were talking about this, I asked who Cassius Marsh was. Martin pulled out a video that he'd gotten recorded for his good buddy Brandon, who was a big head honcho at Nike in their marketing department. And Cash, a player from his favorite team, the Seattle Seahawks, was congratulating Brandon on becoming a father for the first time. And I saw this 10-second video, and immediately the light bulb went off, and it was like, this needs to exist. And, having gone to Duke, I was fortunate to have a bunch of buddies in the NBA, in pro lacrosse, and pro soccer. So I could imagine Mike Posner, who's a big rapper, was on my freshman year dorm. So, I was around enough of these famous people that I could imagine, being the person to, get this for somebody. But even then, it's I could maybe ask for this one time, you might get one favor from Kyrie Irving, and you can't go to him every time.
Sure.
So I really believe that there would be insatiable demand for this product. And the key would be, could we unlock the supply side, and could we get the supply side to do this at scale? So Martin and I, my background is, as you mentioned, is in options trading, is in market making. I worked at LinkedIn, so I learned a lot about network effect businesses there in search. So that's kind of my realm. Martin was the Hollywood producer, NFL agent, so he knew talent really well. But we were not technical. We needed, and I think this starts kind of that team building, right? It's kind of all about the team. There was a guy I went to college with named Devin Townsend, who was not only a world-class engineer, that was the youngest PM at Microsoft. He quit his job after 2 years to travel the world with his best friend and roommate from Duke, and they blew up on this thing called Vine. And Devin, my co-founder, is probably one of the few engineers in the world that had 1 billion loops on Vine.
Incredible.
So he really became an influencer. And Devin and Cody, his roommate, Cody had 4 billion loops on Vine and is now one of the biggest YouTube stars on earth. These two, from probably 2014 to 2016, were super famous, but they weren't rich because they never found a way to monetize. So it really kind of opened up this theory that we had, that in the age of social, there are more famous people than ever before, and people are more famous than they've ever been, but the gap between fame and monetization has never been wider. So someone like Devin, who has, my co-founder has, 30,000 followers on Twitter, if you follow Devin, you're a hardcore Devin fan, and you might like him just as much as the biggest diehard Chicago Cubs fan likes a player on the team, or the biggest Taylor Swift fan likes Taylor Swift. There's just less of them, right? So we really kind of thought that was really interesting. But in building the team, I've since learned that the best founding teams have some combination of these three things: the hacker, the hustler, and the hipster.
Yeah.
And in consumer, you really need all three of those.
And you really did have all three.
In this case, we really did have all three.
Yeah.
And I think it's also super important for founding team construction that there's a relatively limited overlap of skill set, right? So the beautiful thing about working with Devin and with Martin is that like we were able to pick our lanes very, very early. And Martin, hey, you just work on the talent side, you work on supply side, Devin, you go work on building the tech and building product that's so fun that talent would do this for free, but they can get paid. And as an influencer, I trust you more than anyone in the world to build something that you would have wanted to use. Because if I didn't recruit you to build this, I would have wanted you to be on it, right? So build something that you'd like to use and that Cody would like to use. And then from my side, working on the business and focusing on building a team and building a tech company and taking a lot of lessons I learned at LinkedIn about, Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, at every all hands would start by saying, talent is our number one priority, right? And I don't think I got that at LinkedIn until I really was running my own company.
What was the day you got that you really got it? When did you say, this is going to be fun and sexy, we have celebrities, but if I don't get the talent part right, it doesn't matter?
I think that's something that we've really just kind of seen over the last year, especially, right? This point last year, Cameo had about 17 employees. I remember when Time Magazine named us one of the 50 genius companies on earth. We were a 13-person company.
And so you've added, 2 people a week on average since then?
Yeah, but it was a lot more lumpy, right? There were weeks this year where like we'd have a Monday and we'd have 9 new hires in one day. And it's like, the whole company was 13 people, 6 months ago.
So you strike me as a really candid guy with high EQ and IQ. Help me understand some of the big bumps that you've hit along the way on the people part of the business, right? Because I have to imagine now the marketplace is at liquidity. I'm sure a lot of people are lined up around the block to work at a company like this, very well funded. You raised $65 million from top investors. It wasn't always that way, even a year ago. What were some of the days that you said, wow, I really screwed that up on the people side?
Probably the biggest one was I had to fire my brother. He was employee number 1, and he's still my roommate. That was a really, really tough day.
Awkward.
And I don't know that he or my parents will kind of ever forgive that one. But I truthfully believe that for Cameo to become the company that we wanted to, despite him being the single best employee we probably had of the first 10, for a while, we hit a point in scale where the company you needed to be able to communicate more broadly, and that skill set I just wasn't seeing kind of develop. And it was really taking a toll on the company. That was probably the single hardest. And then on top of that, there's been cases where we've hired people from in network that their resume was perfect. It's like this person should absolutely be the right person, for some executive function. And when you make a bad executive hire, that gets really tough because those people now are hiring people on time. And
first 50 hire the next few hundred, right?
They say the first 50 hires the next 500. And I even think as we grew, there was a stat I remember. There was a point where out of the first 28 people, 7 hadn't made it, past 6 months or past a year or something like that. And then we fast forwarded to a point this year where in the next 100, only 3 hadn't made it, right? So I remember having a conversation with my executive team, we did not get 100% at hiring, right? So obviously, as we've grown so quickly and we focused on getting so big so fast, because we kind of knew that in our marketplace, supply begets demand. So if we could just hire more talent people and more salespeople, they get more celebrities on. Those celebrities come on.
Yeah, it's a chicken and egg kind of model, right?
Yeah, but we knew we just had to get eggs. We didn't even need to worry about the chickens for a long time, right? So we just get egg. And then what we found was that, at some certain scale, there were some diminishing returns on having all the talent on. A year ago, people were like, get any Chicago Cub on. Well, now if you have 47 of them.
Yeah, you have diminishing returns after each one. Not to mention discoverability, I have to mention on the website. It's a lot tougher to find when you have 20,000 celebrities.
Search becomes a much more complex issue when you have 20,000 people versus when you had 3,000 last year. So for a variety of factors, our playbook was throw the gas on the fire and just let it rip. And then what we found was, as we were getting bigger and the sales should have been getting easier, our talent team wasn't as productive as they had historically been. And when we were bringing groups of people in, like 9 at a time, 10 at a time, I truly don't know that every single person was able to get the same amount of individualized attention. And there was probably a point where, we were growing so fast, and, I've been opening an LA office this year too. So I've been back and forth a lot. I walk into the LA office for a week, 4 new hires. Like I didn't even interview them. And then I come back to Chicago and there's 9 new people I've never seen before. And then that gets really taxing.
So what were some of the key lessons when you think back to what you changed? Was it slowing down the pace of hiring? Was it better onboarding? Was it, have you gone back to interviewing every single hire? What did you do differently that reduced that bad hire ratio?
I think the number one thing was slowing down hiring. And in this case, like, I actually wouldn't say that we made bad hires. I think that the people that we hired, even if they didn't work out, like everything, like our resumes keep getting better and better and better. The difference was, I think we started hiring, older people, where like not older, I'm talking like people with maybe 5 years experience versus like, we were hiring a lot of people like right out of college,
right?
And we were home growing them, and we were teaching them, the Cameo way to work. And I think that was huge. And when you look at most of our, pound for pound best people in the company, a lot of them were homegrown, and the tougher thing is when you can hire everybody, I think you tend to over-index on experience and maybe under-index on kind of malleability and grit. And the truth is, like, the experience that you might have had at some other fast-paced company also made you a product of that culture that they had. And if that culture is different than this culture, you can have people that on paper are the perfect person, but then, when they get ingested into the body, it's like a liver,
right?
A liver transplant that doesn't work out, right? Like, and the body spits it out.
Just because they were successful at Google or some other company, looks great on paper, doesn't mean they're going to succeed at Cameo, because no one's ever done this before.
Totally. And Matt Maloney, the CEO at Grubhub, gave me some really good advice about this early. And I remember when the first call we had, he goes, "Steven, I run the biggest marketplace that's ever come out of Chicago. You run the one that will be bigger than mine one day. There will be a lot of people at Grubhub that, like, you're going to be tempted to hire because they have that experience and all that." And he said something so interesting. And he goes, in the entire time at Grubhub, there's probably only 3 people in the 15 years I've been running the company that I lost that I actually couldn't afford to lose. He's like, my best people, like, I'm going to hold on to for dear life. And like, if I lose them to you, then like, that's on me. Right? That the corpses of Chicago startups are littered with people that made that big director hire away from Grubhub. And he's like, the hardest thing in hiring is separating, is this person part of a winning team, or are they the reason why we won? And it's, in many cases, it's so hard to know, because, I even look at some of our homegrown people, right, that one day will be VPs or CEOs or COOs at other, companies. If our coaching tree, becomes as fruitful as I'd love it to be, right?
They're going to get poached away, and that's okay.
When I was at LinkedIn, Mike Gamson, who is our first investor and is now the CEO of a company called Relativity in town, Mike Gamson got on stage my very first day at LinkedIn, 9:30 in the morning. There's 36 Zoom screens all around, all the offices in the world. And he goes, "Welcome to LinkedIn. 2 years from today, none of you will be doing the job we just hired you for. We know that, we support that, and we literally have the profile data to prove it. Yeah. Our job at LinkedIn is to make sure that you develop the skills you need to do your dream job, whatever that is, whether it's internally or externally. Your job is to be the best version of yourself here, to become the best version of yourself that warrants you getting that next job. And then most importantly, when you're ready to leave, recruit someone better than yourself to take your place."
It's almost a contract, right? It's like you do a great job in this one, and I will take care of your next job.
They call it the alliance, and then LinkedIn has this next play culture. So that's something I've tried to bring here. Absolutely. I talk to my employees about this all the time. When I have one-on-ones with my skip level or below employees, I always ask kind of 3 questions. It's like, company-wide, start, stop, continue. What do we need to start doing we're not doing? What do we need to stop doing we're doing today? What do we need to continue doing? Number 2, what can I in leadership do better to make Cameo a better place for you? And then 3rd, like, what's your next job? Is it here? Is it somewhere else?
Yep.
What are you interested in? How do we make sure you're on that? And there's one particular employee that really stuck out. Mackenzie, who is like one of our original interns and has been an absolute rock star here, was like, right now I'm like doing customer service, but next I'd love to work like more with talent. And then after that, I'd love to work on a brand side if that ever comes. And then maybe in like 3 to 5 years, I'd love to be a PM, right? And now suddenly like, wow, here's like some person we took in as an intern, college intern.
You've completely opened her eyes, right?
Yeah, and then it's like, if I know you want to be a PM, all right, let's get you on the growth team and let's start making sure that you're surrounding yourself with that.
You mentioned 2 characteristics, Stephen, which I found interesting, and one was grit and one was malleability. Did you choose those words for a specific reason? And if so, how do you assess a candidate against those 2 things? So you don't see them on a resume.
Yeah, those are really, well, I think you do see it as a resume. One thing I always ask to kind of diagnose both, I always ask people, like, what are you learning right now? What's the last book you've read? If someone does not have an answer to what book you're reading right now or the last skill that you taught themselves, there is a 0% chance I'm hiring them. Literally we'll never hire somebody that does that, because like all the best people I know are voracious readers, are listening to podcasts, are always trying to better themselves. And, malleability, it's so critical. The only known at Cameo is that like it's an unknown. We don't know like what tomorrow is.
Yep.
You're going to, if at LinkedIn every 2 years you're changing jobs, that's probably every 6 months at Cameo, right? So we need people that are comfortable with uncertainty. We need people that it's funny. We have a person that works for us that's an absolute rock star. And she joined Uber at employee like 3,000 and left at 20,000 because it got big, right? But like to her, like being 3,000 at Uber was like an early stage company.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
When we came here, she had a little adjustment, I think of like certain processes and structures not being in place. But it's like there's a big difference between joining as an employee 100 and employee 3,000.
Totally different animal.
Totally different animal. And I think the other thing that's really interesting that I've learned a lot about is in markets like Chicago, in LA, where there's less of a startup culture than there is in like Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, people have like created like niches for themselves where it's like, I'm the like 0 to 10 million revenue guy.
Yep, they're known for something. Yep.
I'm the CRO that's going to bring you from 10 million to 100 million. Or, you have another one that, a lady that might be like, hey, I'm the CFO that's going to take you public, right? And I feel like in markets that are less mature, everybody expects that, like, I'm the person that's going to join as employee 10 and, like, I'm going to scale all the way up. And that's a really tough thing because, I might have hired employee 10 because they were the best engineer that I knew at the time, right? But that might not mean that they're the best engineer at, like, a 10,000 person company.
Your ability to attract talent increases as your business increases and your reputation and your ability to pay, right? As well as the issues change a lot when you get to 50 people or 100 people or 150, where you're going to be soon.
It's different.
You go from generalists to specialists.
It's different skill sets. And to be completely honest, one of the things that I always talk to my executive team about is, number one, my goal as CEO is to be the worst person at the company as quickly as possible.
To work your way out of every job you do.
I want every single person sitting around me to be better than me at whatever they do.
Yeah.
So I can focus on the things that that I'm uniquely world-class at. I tell my team that if you've been here 90 days and you haven't hired somebody better than you, that's a huge problem. Because that means one of 3 things. Either one, you cannot identify great talent, which is a problem. Number 2, you can identify great talent, but you don't want to land it because you're scared to. Or number 3, you can identify great talent, you try to land it, but you can't because great talent doesn't want to work with you because they just see, they see something that doesn't make them want to come here.
Right.
And at the end of the day, like all 3 of those are problems. And, probably the number one thing that I look for in my teams now are you able to hire people better than you?
And not everyone can do it.
And if that is kind of like, up and down the totem pole, if that's the mindset, if we are scared to bring better talent in because we're worried about our job like we're worried about, well, what's my place long term,
Right.
then it's like we will not win.
Have you had to part ways with people who could not attract talent or wouldn't attract great talent?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're serious about it.
Yes.
It will tank a company, right? You either
Yep.
it's like the bar raiser concept at Amazon, right? You'll hire people that are better than you, or it's not going to work. You got to go.
Yeah, and it's a very delicate thing because again, I don't interview everybody anymore, and it's so important that I'm aligned with my hiring managers on the type of people we're looking for here. Like, do they buy into our culture? Are their working norms similar to the working norms here? Probably the biggest one that like we're talking about internally right now is creating a exceptional culture of like feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that, especially as a company that employs mainly like Gen Z, like this is a very young company, probably like under 25.
Yeah.
These are classic millennials that, including myself, right?
Yeah.
I'm 2 now as of Sunday, that, got trophies for everything we ever did. And
Yeah.
in Glenview last week, and you got the trophy case. A lot of them weren't, but a lot of them were just showing up, right? And these are people that like they want they all say they want feedback, but when you give it to them, it's like, and you tell them you're not like you're not the greatest thing that God put on earth. Like that can be tough. So I'm really working hard right now with my executive team to create downstream a culture of hard work, a culture of taking ownership and acting like an ownership. Where like if we're like, I'm not a micromanager. I like to hire really, really smart people and let them do whatever they need to do. But when you're a company that like tries to have the perks of a tech company like we do, we've been a distributed team since the start. So every employee has unlimited PTO, they can work from home, all that type of stuff. But if I see a 24-year-old employee working from home and their Instagram story shows that that they're at a bar till 3 a.m. the night before, or they're walking around like Lincoln Park Zoo or doing other stuff, it's like I need to make sure that we're balancing the flexibility of a distributed work schedule with the culture of hard work, because to build a special company, that isn't something that just happens by people clocking in and clocking out 9 to 5.
And it's so much easier to do it now at 125 people. When you get to 500 or 1,000, very difficult to retrofit the culture around feedback.
For sure. And I think that's such a critical thing. And one other thing I talk about every day with my team is that every single person we hire, like the culture gets better or it gets worse. It never stays the same. So even if that's someone that's like an entry level customer service person, if they're making life worse for like those 5 people that they're interacting every day, Cameo is the worst company. So, and it's tough because when you're growing as fast as we did, we net gained 100 employees this year. You might spend 4 total hours in the interview process. By their first day, by lunchtime, you might have spent more hours than they did in the entire interview process. And truthfully, like what I've learned now, getting pattern recognition is like when you make a bad hire, you can like everybody knows like right away.
The hiring manager is the last one to know.
Sometimes.
Right? All the peers, everyone on the team, the people that have to work with that person, they all know right away.
Sometimes the hiring managers know, but sometimes the hiring managers feel like, especially because my team is like still very inexperienced, they're senior managers. Like I think earlier in the year, our team felt like that a bad hire was like a reflection on them personally. Yep. Where the reality is at a startup, they say like 1 in 3, you're in your first like 50 hires, 1 in 2 aren't going to work.
Yep.
And then scale, maybe 1 in 3 aren't going to work.
Yep.
So understanding that there might be great people that just aren't right for this culture. There might be things that we missed in the interview process. There might be people that had they joined as employee, 40 or earlier and like gotten to spend a ton of time with us individually might have become rock stars, but the same person joining at 125 gets lost in the shuffle.
And you have to make it okay for hiring managers to say, you know what, I messed up. I won't make that mistake again and fix it. deal with it, right?
You will make that mistake again, right? It's inevitable.
Absolutely. No one's perfect on hiring, right?
But just having that intellectual honesty and being able to own up to it and balancing like, okay, who can we coach? Like, is this a fundamental problem or is this something that can be coached and fixed?
Yep.
And look, we're not perfect with that today. Like I deal with this every day.
If it was a DNA, how the person is hardwired probably can't be changed. You're better off to move on. If it's competencies and you can train the person, that's different.
Yeah, and look, sometimes there's people like at our company right now, we have people that have come from a lot of other companies and they have other cultures. So what worked at their culture might not work with like another culture from a different company that they came. And that might cause clashes as well. So in some cases, it's like getting people to unlearn habits that might have served them well at the other place, but are not like what is going to make it Cameo work.
Stephen, I give you a ton of credit. Not only have you built a fascinating business, found product market fit, raised a shitload of money. That's all great. What I'm most impressed by, and I think our listeners have understood over the past 20 minutes, is the emotional maturity that you bring and kind of how you think about scaling the talent part of your business, which now as CEO is your key job, right?
Yeah.
I give you a ton of credit for it. Congratulations. How can people learn more about Cameo or get in touch?
Cameo.com. It's all there. Follow us on Instagram at Cameo, on Twitter at BookCameo. And then, we're very, very active on LinkedIn as I'm an alum there and our COO is an alum there. So, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
How much do you charge for a video?
I'm $10, but I'm $100 if it's a business shout out. And I just got booked the other night for $100. So I just did my first $100 cameo.
Congratulations. So, you're on your way.
Yeah, lunch the next couple of days is paid for. So,
Stephen, thanks for making the time.
Thank you for having me.